I want to go straight to the next panel discussion, and of course this one here, we want to talk about the state of Uganda's fintech industry, given the fact that actually these are 40 days and 40 fintechs. We're speaking interoperability, we're speaking including everyone, so we'll definitely dive straight into that, and I want to have my panelists right away. When I invite one by one, please let's clap for them as they come through. And I'll start with NITA Uganda's Head of Marketing and Communications, Mr. Stephen Kirenga. Please let's clap for him. I'll have the CEO, Innocent, please come forth as well, come back here. Mr. Innocent Kawooya, come through, and also Flutterwave. Let's have Neilsimms, Sangho, the team leader. Thank you. The name should be, is it Sangho, right? Oh yes, Sangho. Okay, I'll also have True African, and we'll have the representative is Mr. Andrew Kasule. Thank you very much. And also I'll have Yo Uganda founder and MD Gerald Begumisa. Thank you very much. Please let's clap for them. All right, okay, thank you very much. Okay, how are you, gentlemen?
Thank you.
You good?
Very well. Very well.
Okay, well, this is quite interesting. I want to go to, let me see. I want to start with a big elephant in here. That's NITA, our boss. My question is going to be very simple. What are the opportunities?
All right.
Or where are the opportunities?
Okay. Thank you for that question, and a good afternoon to the audience that's tuned in. So I think the first opportunity, sad as it may be, is the fact that there's been a global slowdown owing to the COVID pandemic. Now, because of the different SOPs like staying at home or having a social distance and reducing peer-to-peer interaction, for fintechs, this allow the fact that fintechs are technology in nature. It allows for them to position themselves as being relevant in providing services to people who can't freely interact. So I think that's the first one. And in Uganda, we've seen an aggressive uptake of internet owing to the pandemic. We're about 27 million mobile phone users, but some of the services in different sectors, say for education. As an example, we run with UNICEF an e-learning platform. Now, the usage of this platform here increased by over 4,000% from when lockdown started. It's called Colibri. So in December, we had about 1,000 users, and in June, we had 94,000. So that is the impact that has been achieved. So also as fintechs, I think the fact that there's an aggressive uptake of IT, now is the time for them to become relevant in positioning their services to be useful to the citizens.
All right, thank you very much. Now, speaking about relevancy, now, Sangho here, I want to ask you, what are the challenges that we're facing so far?
Thank you so much for your question. I think, what happens is, in any market when you're trying to do something that has not been done in the market, there's always challenges. One of the things that we are seeing specifically, at least as Flutterwave, is the consumer has, again, just like Stephen said, is the pandemic has forced people to adopt things that they ordinarily were fearing.
Oh, yes.
So people fear what they don't understand, right? And so what we saw was people initially just feeling, and when it comes to money, it's a bit sensitive, just the feeling of my money is going to be moving through some virtual thing that I don't see. And hopefully it will get to where it's going. What happens when it's stuck? So we had scenarios where people would want to come to check your office before they can use your platform, just to confirm that if my money disappeared,
I know where to go.
I can find this guy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but that's one of the challenges. The second thing has been, of course, even with the adoption of mobile phones and smartphones and internet connectivity, there is still that issue of how do users then begin to come from a place where they're just sending money to each other to use it to transact, right?
Yes.
So, and also just how do you include everyone, even in the deepest, darkest corner of Uganda,
yes,
right? And so that would be another challenge in just developing products, and especially like us where we sit, we are more at the infrastructure level. So we build infrastructure so that other people can build on its products. But many guys who are developing products are not going to that level where they're making something that will include someone who has even never, encountered a payment platform, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we are in that kind of now mindset where we're saying, how can we guide from our learnings? How can we come alongside the people developing the product, as Flutterwave, from our learnings in the different countries across the world, to help them in the design process, to make sure that the products they're building are going to be used even by someone who doesn't even speak English, right? And I think these are the two key things. The other thing would be regulation, which is a double-edged sword. So, the thing was, in the beginning, the fear was that the regulator would not be able to interact with the people who are actually building the product. But, I must commend that government has done a great job in just coming to us and saying, okay, we want to regulate this space. We don't know what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. How can we make sure that we're protecting the person who's transacting, but also you as the business service provider? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I'll go to you, Mr. Andrew. The question is very simple. How best do we advocate for FinTech to impact more sectors and lives?
Thank you very much. It's good that you brought Stephen over here.
Yes.
Mr. Kirenga, because I believe he has a very important role to play.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I'll talk about the charges. If we as FinTechs are to survive, and if we build systems that are really meant to help the people down there, say people in the villages who are saving and transferring money to the commercial banks, we really need to have charges brought down. Our charges are too high. If we can have something to do with the charges coming down, it will be very, very, very helpful for us as FinTechs and to the people who are on the receiving end of our platforms. The other issue would be about reduction of taxes on mobile phones. That is with to do with phone penetration. Most of the services that we're offering, most of the platforms that we are building are mobile based, and if we are building platforms that are going to run on Android, USSD, we need phone penetration to go deep down in the villages. We've been doing some research with Strome Microfinance, and we've gone to places where you won't find a group that has a phone or has knowledge of how to operate a phone. So if we can have reduction on taxes of mobile phones, that will be very helpful for us. Maybe the other thing that I should talk about is the network coverage is still lacking. Not just up country. I'll give you a scenario of a place in Jungo, which is just after NITA along Kasanje Road. We were there and we didn't really have network coverage. And I hear mobile telephone operators bragging how they're in Karamoja, and yet places just over here are not covered. If we can have something to do with that, it will help us, because we are building platforms that are riding on their infrastructure. The other point that I should talk about is protection from foreign companies. We well know that the governments that will provide funding to some of their fintechs, and they will come here and they will influence. If we can have protection, I think that will be very helpful to us.
Okay. You spoke about the network coverage and all that stuff. It's amazing, by the way, how telecom companies keep on advertising how they got us all covered. And you go to some places, you're like, Lord Jesus. But anyway, that's quite interesting. And of course, the measures you've mentioned, the protection bit of it, and of course the taxation, and then the charges. Again, like, people always really look at really using some of these fintechs. At the same time, vis-a-vis the amount of money they lose, they're going to, lose in that particular process when they're exchanging. They rather like, what, I rather not use these, services and all that stuff. But now, speaking about that, so what training is best for fintech stakeholders now? Again, go back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to just speak to what my colleague and friend has just asked. So I think it's important that we appreciate where he's coming from, because research shows that for every 4.6 increase in mobile data use, there is an increase of 10% in economic activity in a country. So it's important for fintechs to be able to fix the problem of access, because if you can access your service, then there's more productivity being achieved. And I would like to just speak to it from from an elementary economics perspective. So on the one hand, as a nation, we had a problem of supply of internet. On the other hand, we have demand.
Yes.
Now, on the supply side, what we've done as a government is that, one, we have built a nationwide fiber network whose intention is to bridge the digital divide. And so far, we are at 4,000 kilometers of fiber and still growing.
Yes.
On the other hand, we have also brought in bulk internet to ensure that. Now, what this means for Omuntu wa bulijjo, for the bulk internet, is that the cost that the normal telco charges today includes the cost that they procure the internet at from a global carrier.
Yes.
Now, in us bringing the capacity to Uganda, we are able to charge them lower than what the global guys would charge. Now, it means that the cost of internet, ideally, should be reduced, because the telecom provider is making a saving in their input cost, and therefore they should be able to pass that cost saving in form of a price reduction. It hasn't happened as aggressive as it should be, but we are still engaging them to ensure, to see that we have them, translate the savings to Omuntu wa bulijjo. Now, on the side of demand of the internet, yes, we know that there are taxes on phones, and as a sector, we've been advocating for the review of these taxes, excise and VAT, in light of trying to grow penetration. However, also as a sector, and and as NITA, recently we partnered with the private sector to launch Uganda's first ICT assembly factory. Now, this factory here is assembling phones that are done locally, and these phones are exempt of VAT as part of support from the government to the private sector player. So this has, and we have seen that ever since we launched this factory in November last year, we have seen an increase of about 10% in the penetration of phones. So I think slowly by slowly, to Andrew's concern, we are beginning to see an increase in the number of phone owners, and relatedly, the addressable market of fintechs is also increasing.
Speaking about the locally manufactured phones here that are exempted from tax. Now, are they also exempted from all tax, even the usage of the phones, for example, OTT tax?
No, I think OTT is a tax that is there. And yes, it has had its shortcomings, and we are having a sector-wide conversation between ourselves as IT sector and the finance ministry to see how we can also review that, because it's not lost on us.
Well, the best way I fight most of these battles, since you guys are already in review, then I'll go and pray on my knees, and I'll pray that the outcome comes out totally positive for almost everyone. Again, what I asked a little bit earlier was what training is best for fintech stakeholders?
All right. So yes, sorry, I got carried away. So the training that is best, I think, even from my previous my panelists on my left, from Flutterwave. I think he shared that the biggest issue, a big concern is regulation.
Yes.
because as fintechs, you're coming into a space that is fairly new.
Yes.
I think as fintechs, it's important that they understand the different cyber laws that speak to how you can exist in a cyber world.
Yes.
And I'm just, and as NITA, we are happy to partner with HiPipo and 40 Days 40 fintechs
yes,
to say that now, guys, let us have sessions where we can train you on the different laws.
Yes.
And this extends to the E-Transactions Act, the Data Privacy and Protection Act, the Computer Misuse Act, and the rest. So I think these laws here, once we understand them as fintech,
yes,
we are able to ensure that whatever we do is compliant. And importantly, now in the age of consumer protection, there will be a lot of scrutiny around how these fintechs are using data that they collect from the users.
Yes.
Equip and upskill our partners in fintech on how to adhere to the different cyber laws. Secondly, again, because fintech is technology, there's an aspect of cybersecurity. So I think also from a perspective of just training and just sharing on safer ways of doing stuff online will be critical. And so we are happy to have that engagement.
Because that's a really, really, really interesting and the most important, I think, of all, being able to transact knowing that actually I'm safe. Instead of, all the time you're transacting and you have no idea who is at the back end, who can actually access your information at the back end to use it for whatever it could definitely be. Going to you, Mr. Gerald, question is very simple. Now, you as also, what can I say, you as a fintech or as also an industry player, the question is, how is the regulatory environment like for you as on the recipient end?
Yes, thank you very much. As Yo Uganda being a 14-and-a-half-year-old technology company, we've had the privilege of being able to observe how the industry has evolved. Earlier speakers talked about how internet was in 2006 and compared with how it is now. I mean, what you're paying for, what you were paying for in 2006, you now just pay a very small fraction of this. And I mean, our big idea in 2006 was in the communications space, and there was a regulatory change that was happening. And so we wanted to take advantage of that opening of the regulation and offer to the general public low-cost international calls. I mean, since then our business and since then we've seen this as a very significant area, very huge area for growth. I mean, 10 years have elapsed since then, but we still see that there is huge opportunity. The uptake of digital payment services and digital services in general is still low, and this is a huge growth opportunity. From a regulatory standpoint in relation to the payment space, we see that the regulator has actually been very supportive of innovation, because there are some markets where the regulator simply would say, stop what you're doing until we finish writing the laws, then continue. But in this case, the regulation has actually followed the innovation. I mean, the mobile money service was launched, and the guidelines for mobile money operations came into effect later, a few years later. And there has been further support from the regulator in terms of the development of the National Payment Systems Bill, which was passed last month and is waiting to be assented. And we also applaud the efforts in the passing of the National Local Content Bill 2019, which is actually quite important for our industry. Essentially what this or that is using natural resources in Uganda has an obligation to purchase locally. They would have local content obligations. They would need to prioritize local players. And I think this also speaks to the area that one of my colleagues mentioned relating to, he mentioned it as protection from foreign players, but I think this is one initiative from a regulatory and from a legal perspective that I think has helped the industry. So overall, I think the regulator has been quite supportive, and we applaud them for that, and we definitely urge them to continue with that support, continue along those lines, because a lot of these innovations might seem very small at first, but could have very huge impact in the country.
All right, thank you about that. And now again, I want to ask you, sir, that is government really playing its part? Do you think government is playing its part? As on the receiving end, well, I'll ask government whether they're also playing their part, but you as a recipient.
I would say, my colleague Begumisa said,
yes,
government is following the industry.
Yes.
They are learning from what we are doing, and they're trying to build laws based on what we are actually innovating. So I should say that they are playing their role.
Government.
Thank you, Andrew and Gerald. I think, yes, government is playing its part. Yes. However, I think it's also a collective effort.
Yeah.
And maybe, just to share that the efforts of the industry are not lost on us. On us. There's actually progress. And I'm happy to share that this morning, actually, we have released some good news for the industry, that our ranking as Uganda on the UN e-government ranking has improved, our online service index.
Oh.
So what this means by online service index, it means that as a nation, the UN has done a survey across the globe and has seen that Uganda is doing very good stuff digitally. We are providing services online from a government perspective, but also for the private sector. There has been an adoption of using the services, but also providing services. So I think as fintechs, the journey is not done, but I think already so far we are getting applause from the UN in saying that Uganda, listen, you're doing well, and we've and we've improved. I think the comment is that Uganda is an LDC, least developed country. However, it's in a bracket of a high online service index. So I think for me that's a very good thing for us to be aware of. Such that the late nights in coding and in enabling services, know that people are noticing, and we're actually improving as a nation.
Huh.
So I hope I've answered you.
Yeah. Oh, you have, and of course he's nodding his head. Sangho is nodding his head. Are you in agreement?
I agree. Just like you said. So the many innovators, always look, and these are guys who, or at least who are not as informed. They always look at regulation as it's coming for them, right?
Yes.
But that's not the case. We must understand the role that we also have to play as innovators, as service providers. And that's why I agree, when he mentions the fact that it's a collective effort, first of all. I also must agree that they have tried to at least do a great job, right? In terms of, coming to the players and asking, what's happening, what can we do? And I know earlier, my colleague, alluded to it when he was saying that he was actually quite involved in like the National Payments Systems Bill. And this is the only way we can see this going forward, right? Also, what I must say is that it's what regulation also does is it makes, because many innovators, especially in Uganda, they think of, developing things as though they're going to always be in that same place, in a small room behind closed doors. What this does is it gives you the perspective of what you need to be thinking of if you're going to do business at a global level, right? And for me, I'm really pro-regulation. If it's done in the right way, it cannot leave the industry the same way, because then the things that are, that it makes you think about are the same things if you cross the border to a country where you can't even push one transaction before everything is streamlined. You're then prepared to do business across the globe, and for me, that's why I am really, quite involved as well, in as much as I can, to see that, this is something that comes to life, because it will not leave the industry the same way.
Speaking of not leaving the industry the same way, now we have, like the entire advocacy has been also more onto the interoperability, a bit of it now. looking at the interoperable services such as cross-network transactions are always on and off. Why is that so? I'll still go to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. If I may just say something small along the lines of training that was mentioned.
Training, yes.
Quick one, very quick one.
Well, it's okay.
Yes. So I think one of the stakeholders, I mean, I see three stakeholders in the fintech space: the consumers of the services.
Yes.
I see the producers of the solutions, fintech companies. Then I also see the regulators.
The regulators. Yes.
So for the fintech companies, I think, like one of my colleagues has said, some of these solutions, when they are produced, it is just one person in a room. And they might never imagine some of the things that they may need to start thinking about once it grows. And so I think training in these aspects, like what regulators expect, what customers expect, how to support them, and so on, is quite important through events like this that HiPipo has put together, and even industry events. In terms of interoperability and the reasons for sometimes having downtime,
yes,
I think when these mobile money services started, and when you look at payment services in general, you had few players in the market. So the way that these players would connect to each other would be each one linking to the other. But as the number of companies grow, you find that the number of relationships that one player has to put in place become very many, and they become very complicated from a technical standpoint, and this could lead to some of the downtime. And so this is where solutions like the Mojaloop system come into place. I mean, through the adoption of Mojaloop, and perhaps with support from the regulatory standpoint in terms of creation of one or more switches, which fintechs can actually champion, and then having these operators connect to those switches, you would essentially reduce the complexity in the whole payment space, and that would reduce on the downtime as well.
Yeah.
And so those are the thoughts I would have about that.
Do you concur, or you'd probably defer? What do you think? Where do you think where do you think we have these on and off so the interoperabilities?
I would concur with Gerald, and maybe some of the other reasons why these platforms are always down. Like he said, they have so many relationships, and the relationships that they build come with some challenges. For example, float management, and whereas have system downtime, that is a very big problem.
Yeah. So you said systems? Systems downtime. Oh, okay. All right, cool. Thank you. You have anything to add on that?
No, I mean, so I've really been privileged to also, experience that because of the work at Flutterwave. We are in today 15 African countries, licensed and transacting and plugged in, because the vision is similar to what Mojaloop is now trying to do on the open source side. And you find, again, just like, Mr. Begumisa mentioned, is that, you're plugging into so many different systems. And the issue with that is that even as your business grows, right, and the users grow, there's also a higher demand on your system, right? So what happens is that those downtimes can be as a result of the system, right, but also as a result of your growth, individual growth, right? And so you find that as the economy, for example, if you look at like this time we had of COVID-19, of course the downtime was increasing, because of course the users woke up one day and said, let's try this thing, right? And so you find that if it's not the system that's breaking, the logistics is breaking, the movement of money, and that's why many, again, innovators believe that they're trying to kick out the bank, but the money has to be somewhere, right? And that there's also actual movement of money on the back end. And sometimes you find that key players in the value chain are not willing, especially if you're not big enough to make that call and say, advance me money for this transaction to happen. Some key players will not want to let a transaction go through without you actually giving them value.
Yes.
And so, but as we begin to, again, have this kind of conversations with all the key players and figure out how can we better optimize, the way the whole value chain is working, I know that where we are now is not where we used to be, because it was way worse, right? And so you find that Uganda is actually one of those countries where we are really fast-tracking, in terms of just adoption. Like I know that from other countries where we're operating, people are coming to see what's happening here, to benchmark on what to do in their countries.
Wow.
But even though we complain of the downtime, we should be cognizant and appreciate the fact that we are still one of the countries where, things, at least we're able to innovate quickly, because again, the regulation has allowed us to play in this space before, closing us off before they understand what's happening. Yeah.
Well, as a regulator, Mr. Stephen.
All right, so I think, thank you for that. I think Gerald had mentioned the fact that the industry has grown.
Yes. And
from a perspective of integration, you now have so many points to integrate to. And as government, what we have done is that we are now building an integration of government systems platform, such that as the fintech, you won't have to go and have multiple integration points with different entities. This means that now, using one platform or unique identifier, such as national ID, you can be able to authenticate one's identity to be able to offer them a service. This platform here will be available for the fintech industry once it's ready. And also what we've done is that because we appreciate the fact that we need to have a standard build of these services here.
Yes.
We have also developed a government-wide enterprise architecture framework, such that as a fintech, if you need to, maybe call in a service of a particular entity, maybe say Lands Ministry or URA, you can have the confidence that the API has been built in a way that can be consumed. Government, we are up to the task, and so I think good days are on the way.
Hallelujah. Now, from your Uganda, I'll ask this: that why is the level one principle of real time, immediate funds transfer key for fintechs to advance financial inclusion?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that we've seen since we started offering services in the financial services space is that customers actually want to see something happening before they really accept that it works. And so this really is what speaks to the whole real-time aspect. So the real-time transfer of funds is very critical to get widespread adoption of the services. And in turn, financial inclusion in a general sense, would actually rely on widespread adoption of these services.
Yes.
I mean, in the past, when you looked at the credit card services, merchants were okay with receiving their funds the next day. So people transact, they swipe their cards, and then the next day, the funds go into their bank account. But these days, the questions which the customers ask us is that when someone pays me cash, I receive the cash immediately.
Yes.
So when I'm paying digitally, I also want to see that money immediately on my bank account.
Yes.
And so that is, this whole real-time fund settlement is a very big part. It has a very big part to play in acceptance of these solutions.
Yes.
The world generally has changed in terms of what people's expectations are. People expect instant things these days, and you cannot tell them to wait until evening. I mean, we've tried to convince some customers to wait until the evening, but they said no, and they say they want their funds in their bank account immediately someone transacts with them.
Yes.
So I see it as a very critical part that would lead to widespread adoption and finally financial inclusion.
From Flutterwave, what do you think?
I agree, because again, especially I would have seen in Uganda, just growing up here, is that the economy is largely driven by small and medium enterprises. And most of these businesses, at least with my interaction, the money they make on that day is partly what they're using even to provide the service, right? And so they wanted to hit the account in real time. The other thing which I could add is just the expertise that even a business which wants to collect money, and if you just give them an API, they won't know how to consume it because they are not even having that expertise in-house. So what I urge, like many of the players is, let's begin to also think of the customer we're building for. One thing we saw in this season of the lockdown was we were able to collect money from all payment platforms, right? But the adoption still was the rollout time was still not as fast. So what we did is we built a product called Flutterwave Stores. And what that did was, for the small business, it's a template of a store.
Yes.
So when you come today and say, I want to collect payments from my customers, you don't need to build a website, right? You get that template, you put in the photos of your product, you put in the price, we are plugging into our customers who are doing deliveries. Right?
Yes.
So Safe Border, Pink Tie, Pink Cloud. And so as a small business, once you plug in and sign up today, put in your products, if someone buys from you, we trigger the delivery company. They come to your house, pick up the product and deliver it, and you get your money.
Yes.
Now, from the time that the lockdown happened to date, we have had 4,500 small businesses.
Yes.
Who ordinarily would think, if I'm going to collect payments online, I need to get a website, get a website designer, figure out how I'm going to get the border guys to deliver this product.
Yes.
And yet this value we can, because we have in-house talent, which many fintechs here have, you can build a product like that you don't think of charging people on the onset, but as they transact, you're making money. And so for me, I believe that would have been a hindrance, that the expertise, that then if we begin to come out as innovators and say, okay, looking at the context of my customer, what can I build on top of just payments or just logistics to add value to what I'm doing and what they are doing?
Yes.
There's a sweet spot there. You know, there's so many amazing things we can do as guys who are rolling out these services.
Well, thank you very much for your contribution. It's been beautiful really having you, and of course, at least each one of you out there who are really watching us on TV, you definitely would learn one or two, three things, and I definitely want to thank you very much for coming through.